and welcome. My name is Mary Lou, and you're listening to the Hera Hotspot podcast. This week, I'm talking to Tracie Long, a spiritual guru, about being a civil celebrant, shamanic healer, and a tarot reader. Tracie has had spirit in her life from a young age, when she remembers seeing spirit animals in her bedroom and hearing her grandfather speak to her. We explore what is involved in shamanic healing and how Tracie helps to heal both physical and emotional wounds, which often involve past life work and soul retrieval. We also touch on grief and how it affects people differently and the benefits of planning your own funeral. We explore the history of tarot, and Tracie explains how her tarot beginner courses work. Finally, Tracie's guide, Dave, advises that we should all try and get to know our own guides, as they are able to help and support us through different stages of life. She also reminds us that it is important to ground and protect ourselves when working with spirit. I hope you enjoy it. So when I looked at your website, you have a plethora of tools in your belt. I've got down here that you work with the angels, you do tarot, you do meditation, you do spiritual development, you do feng shui, you do energy clearing, you do shamanic healing, you do manifesting, astrology, and life coaching, which is an amazing array of skill sets to have. When you meet someone initially, say you sat next to someone at a dinner party, how would you, rather than reel through all that, how would you introduce yourself if they asked what you did? How do you identify?
Well, nowadays I don't. I say I'm a celebrant.
Oh, okay.
I sort of gave up saying I was a psychic because it goes into too much discussion when you go into it. But I guess for this, I will just say, that I work with spirit. I just say I work with spirit. Sometimes I feel a bit cheeky. I say I work with dead people. I really want to wind them up. I go, I just work with dead people and see what they say.
So being a celebrant is more of your latest thing, is that right?
I've been doing that for about 5 years now.
Okay. And you were saying the other day you were starting out wanting to do weddings, but actually you tend to be asked more to do funerals at the moment.
Yeah, it's only this year that I've actually done some weddings. They kept getting cancelled because of the COVID anyway, and people's situations kept changing. So whenever I thought I had one, it would end up changing. So it just never seemed to fall into place. But yeah, I got the funerals really quickly.
So how would that? I mean, having been raised a Catholic, and the only services I've been to are funeral services are church services. How does that differ? What would that look like?
Well, celebrant type funeral is non-religious usually, although you can have a hymn or a prayer in it if you want to, but it just gives the freedom for the family to just have whatever they want to have within the service. So if they don't want to have a eulogy, they don't have to. If they just want all poems or just readings, they can have that. They can have whatever music they like.
And where would it take place? What building?
In the crematorium.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it just takes place in the crematorium. I mean, if you have a celebration of life ceremony, you can actually have that anywhere you like. Especially as times are at the moment where wasn't allowed a lot of people in the crematorium. If the family then wanted to do something private themselves, then you can go and do a private ceremony. But a lot of people now are saving them to next year for anniversaries and birthdays and things like that, to have the big celebrations. Okay. But yeah, you can actually hold one anywhere, really.
So you said earlier that you worked with spirit. Does that tie in with being a celebrant? Do you make connections?
I do. They connect with me, which I didn't realise was going to happen. But obviously, as we know in this business, there is a bigger picture there. So I kept wondering why I kept getting people in my bedroom sort of like 2-3 o'clock in the morning, and all these noises and being awake, and I suddenly start to realise when I then spoke to the families that I had spirit with me. And then after a couple of, it didn't take long for me to cotton on that what was going on. I suddenly realised I had that person with me. So when I started to tune in, I could then connect with them and with the family at the same time. So therefore, once I'd made the initial contact, I could then put most of the service together with the help of the person in spirit, and then just give it to the family and say, this is what I've done for you. And I haven't had anybody come back to me and go they didn't like it or didn't want what I gave them. So, and those that know that I'm a spiritual celebrant, they actually contact me for that reason.
Okay.
Not all my services are spiritual services. Some I just get contacted to just do a normal service, and then spirit is not mentioned unless they bring it up first. But most of the time mine are because of what I do. That's how I get those.
Okay. So you have this connection with spirit. How long have you had that?
My earliest memories of spirit connecting to me, I probably was about 8 or 9, I would say. I know I was at junior school. And that's as far back as I can remember. I can't remember anything further than that.
And did you come from a family of people that could connect? Was it familiar to you? Was that, actually, I don't quite know what's going on.
Well, I do actually come from a family connects on both sides, but it wasn't really spoken about in my household. So, I think my parents were a bit nervous of it when I was younger. And if I said anything, I was just met with blank stares usually. And I think they were just nervous of it. So I think they were aware that it was in the family going back, especially on my granddad's side. But yeah, it was never really spoken about. It was later in years, but not when I was younger.
So when did you start to work with it?
I would say that I had quite good intuition. That's how I would have explained it to anybody when I just knew something was going to happen, or I knew I had to go somewhere or avoid something. So I would have put that down to just having good intuition. I guess really the thing that triggered it the most is knowing that I was hearing voices, which was my granddad talking to me. So he used to call my name. And obviously, when I was a child, I used to think that was God talking to me. But then as I got older, I realised it was my granddad, who does work quite a lot with me in spirit, even though he died when I was about 5. And then I had an experience where I saw an angel, and I was in my 30s when this angel appeared in my living room. And, well, I was just amazed, really. I just sat there sort of looking at it, and I just couldn't really believe what it was. But I think I'd been going for a bit of a difficult time, but then after that, everything seemed to change once I saw the angel appear.
What did it look like?
Well, I can remember. I mean, I could actually draw it still. These type of experiences, you never forget them. It had sort of blondish hair, and it had a very that porcelain-looking face, if you like. It's hard to explain, but it was quite tall. I would say around about 6 foot-ish, and it had a really big, wide light all the way around it. It didn't say anything or do anything; it just appeared. But I mean, it is a bit of a shock when that sort of thing happens, and you sort of like, oh God, I think I'm looking at an angel. You know, it's not a spirit. There is a difference between the two. I see spirit people all the time. So from that day on, as if it appeared just to tell me that there is more out there, there is backup, there is support. It did really sort of change my whole way of thinking, and it changed my life, really, because I then started to get more interested in the spiritual side of things and go into it a bit more. So I know that a lot of people do go down this path when they have something happen to them, maybe a death in the family or something tragic, or they find something to cling on to try and find a way in life. But that wasn't actually the case for me. It's because I saw this angel and I just thought, well, right, I think I better explore it a bit more now. And that came along. So my first interest was to do with angels, but then it just sort of progressed from there, and I got really interested in everything and anything, and just to see what I could do and what I couldn't do. So it just led me down this journey of just doing lots of different things. But it's my way my brain is. I like to get to the bottom of everything, and I like to research everything and just to find out. I am a bit of a skeptic as well, believe it or not. So I have to find out if this stuff does really exist, if it really can happen. And then once I'm convinced, that's it. And I'm sort of telling other people and putting it out there once I'm convinced it actually does happen or does work.
So we were going to focus today on more of the shamanic and the tarot. Can you explain to me and to people listening what shamanic is?
Well, it's an old Native American style of healing, and I mean it goes back many centuries. People there, they would have somebody in their village that would be a medicine man or a medicine woman, and they would go to them for anything really. It could be for wisdom, it could be for healing, it would be maybe midwife, just the wise counselor within the group that they had. But if anybody in the group had a problem or needed healing, they would go to them maybe for herbs or finding a way to treat whatever they had. So it's just a very old style of healing. So when I first started doing it, I wasn't really aware of what I was doing. I did try to go and learn Reiki. So I did level 1. It wasn't really resonating with me at all. I thought, this is not really what I'm supposed to be doing. So I tried crystal healing. That was better. I quite like that. I could resonate with that. Then I just started to do some research to see what it was I was actually doing. And then as I went along the line of looking into it, I realised it was shamanic style healing that I was doing. And I just could do it. And everything that I read up and studied and practiced and done just actually worked. So I knew that somewhere along my line, you know, maybe in my ancestry or maybe in a past life, that there was somebody there that did do it once upon a time. Because I believe we're all given these gifts and we just have to tap into them and see what ones we were given and to actually work with them. So I've been doing shamanic now for about 7-8 years, I guess.
Do you channel a Native American guide in that?
I have tried, yes. I can't tell you what his name is offhand. I have it written down. I'll just call him in. He's got really short sort of afro hair. So he's not traditional Native American Indian. He doesn't look like that at all. But there are different shamans in different cultures anyway. They're not all Native American Indians. So he is my guide. And I actually saw him when I was having healing once. There's not many people that I would go to for healing, but there was this lovely lady called Joy that used to do my healing many years ago. And I met her by chance at a psychic fair. And I just wandered over and thought, we'll see. You know, if she can actually do it. And I could feel what she was doing. And then from that day on, I thought every now and again when I felt I needed a little bit clearing, I'd go and see Joy. So I'd go to her place and she'd have just so many crystals, a bit like June really everywhere. And once we was in doing I was relaxed at that time. She was doing the healing. I actually see him come over. I could see his face. So I know what he looks like now. And that was the only time I ever saw him. But again, it's one of those things you don't forget, so you can always remember what they look like. So he pops in, he helps me with my shamanic healing. And also sometimes my guides, I would work with them. I have a guide my main guide, Dave, who I work with a lot. I would normally call him in, and my shamanic guide as well, they would come in. So we'd do it between all of us, I guess.
So if I came to you for healing, because I know what that would look like if I went to Jean, for example, are there different tools that you use for shamanic, or is it more about just the energy?
Yeah, it is different. Depends what I'm doing. Sometimes I don't always know what I'm going to be faced with. So sometimes you have to do soul retrieval. Other times it's just clearing. Other times we go back into past lives. It all depends what the problem is with the person, but usually it's a block somewhere within their life that's causing the problem. Sometimes it can be a physical blockage there, which you just push the energy in to move it around, so maybe it can naturally clear itself. Other times you have to remove something. There is a way of doing that where we would use an egg to actually absorb some of that negative energy, where you would roll it on the person or that area and try and get it to go into the egg, so then it can be removed that way. Of course, you don't want to take on board everything yourself when you're actually doing the healing, which I realised I did do that sometimes, especially when I was doing cancer patients. I would take on a lot of what was going on with them and I'd clear them, but I'd be stuck with it. So I'd have to then try and go and clear that energy myself. But yeah, there is a different type of, the way that you set it up is different, and the way like you channel is different as well to normal healing, like crystal healing or angelic healing. I don't call angels in when I'm doing my healing.
Okay, so I've got lots of questions from that. So when you're talking about energy, from my perspective as a kinesiologist, the energy I'm working with is in the meridian. So it's kind of in the body. It's part of what they would term in traditional Chinese medicine as qi. So if there's a blockage in the meridian, it's compromising the meridians either side. And those blockages can occur from either emotional trauma or physical trauma, or we're looking at biochemical. So the energy you're working with when you're trying to remove it, are you looking at energy within that body like I would, or are you looking more at auric energy?
Yeah, I look within the body. We do something that's called scanning. So we can scan with our hands to find out where it is and find out where the blockage is. And then you can sort of manipulate that energy and do it that way, if it is just a basic clearing that we're doing. If it's an emotional blockage, I say it's evolved over time. We tend to go into past life now to see where that problem came from. And sometimes they don't even go back into past lives. It could just be this life. It could be something that was being held within their system that they didn't realise they were still holding on to. And whenever they go into their meditation or go into their deep relaxation, and they can think, they would go back to the place that caused the problem. And then, generally speaking, within the next 24 hours, there would be a release. So there would be probably, they'd be quite emotional.
Are we talking about, I often use the phrase, it's a physical manifestation of an emotional state. Yeah. So are you talking about historical emotional traumas and blockages that are manifesting as pain or aches?
Yeah, sometimes it could be a past life issue where they've had a trauma in another life and it's materialising for some reason in this life. Then you have to go back and try and clear that. That's quite difficult to do when you're trying to heal something of that. Say, they've got a pain somewhere that just relate back into a past life. You could take them back to the past life, and so they could understand how they got it and why they got it. And then with a sense of understanding, they could possibly clear it that way themselves. That could work, or maybe, it's not that type of healing anyway, but usually it tends to be like a soul retrieval I would do, which would be for severe shock. When somebody's died and they feel like they've lost a part of themselves, or if they've suffered like PTSD, severe depression, something of that nature, where they've been on medication and they just feel like they're lost and they don't know where they're going with anything. Normally we have to take them back into to that situation to try and understand it. And this is all done, while they're in meditation, and I'm actually healing on the outside while they're working on the inside.
So that was explained to me once by my homeopath, whose husband's a shaman.
Yeah.
Because it sounds quite dramatic, soul retrieval, as though you've lost the whole of yourself. But she explained it like your soul being a bag of tennis balls that gets shaken up by trauma, and a couple of the balls come out. So it's a part of you that's come out. Is that how you see it?
Yes, it's not the whole soul, it's just a part of them. They always feel, maybe when somebody's died suddenly, they feel that part of them is missing. Or they were in a long-term relationship and that's broken down, but the love was still there and they feel part of them is missing. So some people can actually give part of their soul to somebody else. Mothers do it quite often with children because they have a fear that they don't want something to happen to their child, or if something has happened, a sense of loss. So therefore they give part of their soul to that child, which they might not necessarily want it, because in that case you're holding that child back as well. So they give it freely, and then they always feel that sense of loss. So it's about them understanding and trying bringing that back to them so they have a sense of wholeness and dealing with that grief that had happened at that time, or trauma. So basically how it works, to simplify it.
So, see, I'm a picture person, which is why I quite like the analogy of the tennis balls in the bag. So how would you describe, because that giving a part of your soul to someone, if you had to put it in an image, what would that look like? Or is it literally just a collection of energy?
If you was to look at it, say if you looked at your heart, it would just have a little hole in it. That's basically how it would look. In some cases, it could just be fractured, like a little crack in it, that's what it would look like to us when we're trying to get it back, or, you know, for you to be able to have an image. That's what it would look like. So we just bring that back and put it back where it's supposed to be. Most of it is about a sense of understanding where it comes from. I had something that happened to me recently. I've lost quite a lot of friends during COVID. 2 of them were best friends. And many years ago, I lost my best friend to cancer, and I thought I dealt with that. And it was only when another friend died recently, and it was very similar, that I actually dealt with the loss that I had back then. But if you'd have asked me, I would have said, yeah, I've done it. That was over 20 years ago, but actually I hadn't. So until you actually visit that back to that place that brings back that emotion, is when you realise that perhaps you haven't dealt with something that's happened years ago and it's sort of stuck there. So that was quite a physical thing for me. So I actually sort of felt part of my heart breaking open. It's hard to explain it unless it actually happened to somebody. But that was it, healing. You know, as far as I'm concerned now, it's probably been dealt with. I'm okay with it.
I think it's, I mean, the world that you and I are in, it's quite normal to talk about that sort of physical reaction to an emotional, you know, a physical response to an emotional trauma. But for most people, especially in Western society, it is get on and do, go to the doctor for a pill. That connection, that intuition is gone. When you were saying this about your friend, I remember when my sister passed away 11 years ago, and I was with her. We were all with her. And I remember talking to my other sister and saying to her, I can physically, because that's quite it's quite a beautiful process in itself, but obviously it's very surreal, and there is a level of trauma or grief about it. But I remember saying to her, it's a that when that happened, it physically affected me. I can feel it in my body, the whole of that process, the trauma, the surrealness, the beauty. And it was like almost like nettle barbs sort of settling into my body. And I had to process it and talk about it. And at the time, I wasn't doing this work, so I don't know how I would have termed it, but I had to basically recognize it in order to heal that, because it was physically part of me. So I can totally understand when you're saying that your friend's death, when you're physically feeling it in your heart. But people, I'm sure they can relate to it, but I don't suppose they often think, actually, how can I make that go? Because they don't understand that the energy medicine or the shamanic healing can really work with that physical trauma from the emotional loss.
I mean, the people can heal themselves if they were to go into that grief, but the way society is, especially here, is that they don't want to deal with it. They want to brush it under the carpet, put it to one side, not think about it. They don't want to have all the emotions that are associated with it. But then we have all those emotions for a reason. So if you suppress them, you're going to have some repercussion of that, which usually manifests in as a physical illness.
The breakdown of the word disease. If you're not easy, it will and I truly believe that emotional state sits in you and will affect your cells, and so then affect the function of your body, and then be created or manifest as disease.
Yeah,
I think people find that, or some people can't correlate that.
Well, I suppose if you think of something that's happened in your life, and if you can talk about it quite easily and openly, and it doesn't have an effect, you've dealt with it. But if you talk about it and you can't, or you can't talk about it, but if you do talk about it, you have a sense of anger, loss, upset, whatever, you haven't dealt with it. It's still,
you're triggered.
It's a natural process. We all have to do it. You know, it's your time's up. I believe your time's up when your time's up. You go when you're ready to go. You're not going to go before your time.
No. I think for some people, when you say some people can deal with it, and they're like, oh, how do I do that? I think sometimes it's as easy as when you sit with an emotion, and I think we seldom do this because we're tend to be a rush society, or we distract ourselves with social media or TV or going out or whatever it is. When you can sit and actually go, where do I feel it? Whereabouts in my body am I feeling this grief? And what does it look like? And I've had it done to me, and it's it's like, what did it like? Oh, it looks like a sheer wall of dark. Well, what kind of material is it? Well, it's like a metal, it's shiny. And the more you sit in that and focus, and it could be like a spiky red ball or a melting, when you can physically term it, and the more you sit with that emotion, that, let's say, the shiny grey wall of metal can then start to soften or become something else. And it can sometimes be as easy as that, can't it? Just sitting with that emotion, look at what it feels like, what colour it is, what it maybe tastes like, and then that starts to dissipate, doesn't it, and break down.
You have to go through a process with it. I mean, there's various stages of grieving. There's disbelief, there's anger, there's upset, and then finally there would be acceptance of, I think there's about 6 or 7 stages that everybody goes through. But it's recognising where you are and what stage you're at, and just carry on through the process until you get to the inevitable of accepting, because we do all have to die eventually. And I think if we just spoke more openly about it, and I do really urge people that, should actually have some sort of plan for when they do pass away. They should have a plan in what they would like, what songs they would like, how they would like it to be. My friend that just passed about 6 weeks ago, she actually done a whole funeral. It was all done. She booked her coffin, she booked her flowers, she booked her horse and carriage because she wanted that. Booked me. I had to do the funeral. And basically how she wanted it to go, what poems she liked. So it was easier for all of us to be able to do with, because we knew we was just giving her what she wanted. So these families that don't know what to do, because somebody might pass suddenly, because believe it or not, most people do not know when their time is going to be up. So why are you not prepared? You're prepared for everything else in your life, for getting married, for having a child, buying a house, getting a job. Why are people not preparing for that side of their life, which is going to happen?
I could make an assumption that by her engaging with that process and choosing all those things must have helped the people around her.
Yeah, definitely. We started planning it about a year before.
Right.
Yeah, afterwards she sort of was thinking about it, what she wanted, told me that I had to do the service. Then I think with other friends, she did book she had a wicker coffin and booked her flowers and done her will and all the things, all the process that you go through. She pretty much had that all in order, which, is still difficult for everybody, but it made it a bit easier. I don't think she was ready to go. That she definitely wasn't. She was very young. It happens. We don't actually know what we're going to die of either. So, and they always say that it's pre-designed before we come here. We agree to everything that's going to happen in our life. People that we're going to be associated with, our family, how long we're going to be here for, what we're all past. It's all about experience. It's all about your soul growth. So whatever you choose. And most people that are on the spiritual path or work the same way as I do, they tend to have quite difficult lives. And I don't know, maybe because we need to relate to other people, I guess. And it's all about how you deal with everything that you're given.
I remember when my sister passed over, she was 40 and she wasn't married and she hadn't had children. And again, I wasn't doing this work then, but you get these sort of classic reactions from different generations actually saying, and it's the narrative of, she never got to marry, she never got to have children, she didn't sort of get to lead the life she should have done or whatever. And I always thought, actually, as you say, it's like they were saying, if your life is an alphabet, that she left at M and she didn't get to do the end of the alphabet. And I'm like you, I think, and even then it was like, actually, she got to her Z, that her life was meant to be that, she wasn't meant to marry and have children. She wasn't robbed of anything. And I think even, and however tragic it is because of the innocence and the purity, when children go, because it's that human narrative that you want, everyone lives till they're 80 or everyone gets to old age. We don't. And whether they pass over when they're 5 or when they're 40, they came, in my mind, they did what they came to do, and they'd got to their time. And that it is hugely challenging. Even as I say it, I'm aware of how challenging that can be for people who've had that loss, who have created that future in their head that relational or friend hasn't had.
That's right. Yeah, my other friend that died earlier in the year, Modernette, she was a black lady. We'd known each other for probably about 20 odd years. She passed to cancer. She was 44. And the last conversation we had was the same, about she'd not got married and she'd not had children. And I knew that she'd been unwell, but I didn't know to the extent. I don't know if it's a cultural thing where they don't talk about it as much, or maybe she just didn't want us to know how bad it was. Between that conversation and 6 months, she had died. She looked perfectly happy and well to me the last time I saw her. But I had an inkling. I did say to her, "Are you well now?" And she said yes. So maybe she just felt well at that time. And when she was asking me these questions, something within me, I said to her, "Well, I don't actually think you've missed that much. I think having kids is overrated. And I think getting married is overrated. So if it's not in your life plan to do that, then I won't worry about it." I think like many people, if they go back to the times, maybe the first marriage they had, you think, well, we should have done that. You could have wayward kids, and you could have you could think, oh, we should have done that at that time. Lots of people have these things, but they just build it up as like a happy ever after. But life isn't like that. So I know the way I said it to her was, I don't think you've missed anything. She may have, if she had lived, got married and had kids, but that obviously wasn't in her life plan to do that. And at that time, I don't think she actually missed out on anything. If you've got children, it's hard work. If you're married, it's hard work.
Yes. Tick. So if we just sort of move sideways really and talk about communicating with spirits or angels using cards. I know that Jean does oracle cards, but you particularly use tarot. Do you only use tarot?
No, not only. I have past life cards. I've got various different cards, really. But most people contact me for tarot readings. That's what I'm known for, is my tarot.
And why are you particularly drawn to them?
Well, many years ago, when I started to get into it, I just wondered if I could do it. So I went to this group. Well, it was a shop actually, and I thought I'd do a little course there and just see if I could do it, and I could just do it, and I thought, oh, this is good. But I could see that other people couldn't quite grasp it, and I couldn't understand why they couldn't grasp it, and I thought maybe it's not simple enough for them to the way it was being taught. I've obviously practiced it for many years and did cheat readings and loads of events and whatever to get to the stage I am now. It's been a bit of a journey, but I could just naturally do it. So I never had a problem with it.
I happened to be reading a book that Jean gave me the other day, and it gave me the history or the origins of the tarot. Are you aware of those?
Vaguely. I mean, when I teach it, I don't really go into the history because it takes so long to actually do a course these days online. Yeah. We're looking at like at least 6 hours. So if you do the history as well, you're looking at, taking even longer to learn it. And then you've got your practical bit as well. So I say to people, go off and learn it themselves. But yeah, I know that it goes even back to Egyptians. It's been around for a long time.
If you don't mind, I'm going to share some just for the so people can, before we go into tarot, because I brought it up with Jean yesterday and we both agreed it was a bit, tarot's, that's quite big, that's quite serious, it's kind of slightly black magic-y and a bit scary. But once I'd read this to Jean, she saw it in a totally different light. So before we then go into it, in the hope of having the same impact on people who are listening, I mean, it's a little complicated at the beginning, but it goes right back to 300 AD and the time of Alexandria, where a lot of people were elders and wise people and teachers were meeting. So if I just read from this book, 3 years later, Hypatia was brutally murdered by the Nitrian monks, a fanatical sect of Christians who were supporters of Bishop Cyril. Whatever the precise motivation for the murder, the departure soon afterwards of many scholars and free thinkers, marking the beginning of the decline of Alexandria as a major centre of ancient learning. After the burning of the Library of Alexandria, a group of magi, elders or wise men, from many countries and traditions met near Alexandria in Fez. Since they spoke many different languages, communication between them was at times difficult, and to solve this problem, they used the language of symbols. Many symbols have a pre-existing meaning, independent of conscious understanding. They are to the subconscious mind what words are to the conscious mind. Then goes on to explain, which is probably why you find it easy, that it is through meditation and interpretation you're able to read what the meanings are. Beyond their inherent subconscious meaning, when symbols are used by groups of people for years or even generations to embody a specific teaching, they become imbued with extra meaning. Later students with no personal instruction can, by meditating upon such symbols, retrieve the meaning that was imbued into them. They devised ways to use a series of pictures for games and for fortune telling. Today, these pictures are the major arcana of the tarot. And it goes on to break a couple of them down. So I just thought it was fascinating that it was created as a form of language between elders, teachers, and free thinkers who couldn't communicate because of the language barrier.
Okay, yeah. I think there are a lot of books out there and a lot of ways of learning it. But they're too complicated. Is broken down into like the colours, the symbols, what's in the background and all of that. Fundamentally, if you're psychic or you can use your intuition, you don't really need to look at all that. It comes in. I work with spirit at the same time, so I just don't just work on a psychic level when I'm doing my readings. I work with spirit and I work with my guide. And I connect to the person that I'm reading for. So it's a combination of all of those. So I sort of try to teach people to do it that way as well, if they can. But of course, if you're not psychic and you can't connect to spirit, then you can just read them as cards. They all have basic meanings anyway that you can pick up on. But to be a good reader, you really do need to have something a bit more than just learning and memorising meanings of the cards.
And one also presumes it's an interpretation in the circumstances you're in.
Yes, there's different spreads and ways of laying them out, and depending where they come up and the spread that you use, the meaning will be different. So that's the bit I think people struggle with when they're learning how to use them.
Right.
Because in one spread it will mean something, but if you put it into another scenario and another spread, it will mean something slightly different. But it's not that, if you take it step by step, it's not that difficult to get to the end result. To be able to read. Well, I don't think so.
But you're doing, I saw that you were doing a beginner's course online.
Yeah.
And is that a day course or a?
Yes, I used to do a 6-week course where we used to do it once a week for 6 weeks. And then I found that over time people couldn't make it. There were missing ones and things like that. So then it got condensed to a weekend. And now it's actually condensed down into a 1 day. So that's why I say it is at least 6 hours. If you get a lot of people, especially when it's doing face-to-face and you maybe have maybe 8 people, say, we will go on forever. It's just so like many questions and like their way of interpreting it and then practicing and doing the practical side of it. I mean, once you get engrossed in it and you start doing it, I mean, time just flies out the window. You don't realise where the time's gone. So I tried to condense it down to round about 6 hours long with only short breaks, and they're normally eating their lunch at the same time. So you can get through the basics of how, learning maybe each card. So we do the minor arcana first, and then we go into the major arcana afterwards. And then you get to practice like different spreads and practice with each other. So it's better to have a partner to do it with, but you don't have to have a partner, but it is better if you've got a partner with you at the same time to practice with. And then that's done in the beginner. So then I would say to people, you need to practice for about a year on your friends and family and whoever will let you. And then after a year, you can then go into the advanced one. And then that's, not quite as easy, because that's like the year forecast that I do and different types of spreads and things like that. So you just got to practice using them for a start. And then afterwards, you can then go into doing the advanced, which usually takes, I will give them somewhere between 6 months and a year to learn that. And
they're kind of they're perfecting it in all that time.
Yeah, they have to read for me, they have to do a year forecast for me, so I can get where they're at, where their head's at, and they have to do 2 people that I pick that they don't know and read for them and get the feedback. Plus, they have to do a lot of online work, telephone readings, email readings, Zoom readings like we're doing. There is a process that they have to go all the way through before I'd actually sign off a certificate that they've completed it. So the beginner's one is not difficult. You will learn how to use all the cards and what their meanings are and a few little spreads, but you do have to go away and practice it for quite a while before you can then do the second part. So,
and a little bit like Jean and I have been amazed over the last 6 months or so, actually, how effective online meditations or readings are, because I think it would be easy for people to think, well, actually, you have to be in the same room as me. But really, you know, guides are guides and energy is energy. So it doesn't make any difference for you, does it? Where people are.
No, I mean, I've been tested many times over the years, and I've been just given a name. I would just be sent a name, right, do a reading on this person, there's the name. So you just do the reading. Other times you might be given a person to speak to do a reading. So throughout the organisations or people that I've worked with over the years, they would test you anyway. You would need to be tested.
What impact has living with spirit had on your life? One presumes you can't imagine it any other way.
Oh, no, I've just got used to it. I said I've had it for a child. I used to think God used to talk to me, and I used to think all the animals that I could see used to live under my bed. So I literally could see them every night. And I used to run and jump on my bed because I used to think, where are they? They must live under the bed. So it started off more animals really than people. But then when you see shadows, and I've actually seen them appear as people like me and you, to various different shades of grey, white, whatever, movement, orbs, everything. You just get used to it. I think if it never happened, I'd be wondering where they'd all gone. What happened? So you just end up living your life like it. You just get used to it.
Yeah. I was saying to Jean yesterday over lunch about the conversations. It's quite hard now to have conversations with people that don't work with spirit because they don't know what to talk about, because that's such a big part of my life now. It's really odd that people aren't connected. I'm like, oh, what do I say? Yeah. I can't say that and I can't see that.
Yeah, it does make actually interaction with some family members and some friends quite difficult, especially if they don't believe in it. Like my friend Modernette passed this year. She didn't believe in it. So we never spoke about that. I've got other friends that don't want to talk about it, maybe because it might worry them or scare them a bit. And then other friends that just love it, and we don't shut up. We just
What do you think it is about it that scares people?
I think it's the unknown, because they probably watched too many horror films or read too many books where they think they jump out on them and do stuff to them. It's very unlikely that you're going to attract anything like that. I mean, I've even worked with spirit that's not been that pleasant, and they've not been unpleasant to me. It's just, I think it's all in your attitude and how you approach them and stuff like that. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, why would you worry about your nan or granddad in spirit appearing or being around you? They usually only come into you for if you need comfort or something like that, or less you call upon. So why would you worry? You never worried about them when they weren't here. It's just a shift in perception of how you see it, isn't it? So I love it when I've got my nan and granddads around. I think it's brilliant. I love that.
So do you have how many children do you have?
I've got one. Right.
And does she have any gift?
But I think there is something there, but she's scared of it. So
okay.
Yeah, she'll listen and she'll talk a bit about it, but she's like, oh my God, you'll have to peel me off the ceiling. If anything like that happened to me. So maybe she might come to terms with it a bit later down the line. But I mean, she's 38, so I don't know. Maybe she will, maybe she won't.
Well, you said you only came into it really in your 30s. So that's fascinating.
I wasn't ever scared of it, though.
No.
It never worried me like that. I suppose it was just a sense of not really understanding it when I was younger. Like most young people, I guess. You don't really know what's going on. But if you feel somebody sitting on your bed, or the light goes on and off for no reason, or the kettle starts, or the telly goes off, and things start happening around your house, and they automatically think their place is haunted. It causes a problem. So it's the fear that sets in.
I hadn't planned on asking this, but I will. Don't feel you have to. Just before we end, does your guide Dave, or do you want to channel a message at all?
He's a bit cheeky, Mark.
Yeah, I've heard. It'll be refreshing.
I've had my nan here today because I'm seeing my mum, so I've had it in both ears. He basically, he thinks that most people should try and find out who their guides are, because we have well, it's a bit of a different subject, but we've been together in past lives. So I've actually been married to Dave twice in other lifetimes. So he's a bit like my sort of best friend. So as I can hear him and talk to him all the time, and we sort of joke and we have that banter. So anybody that's ever worked with me, they've seen or heard what goes on between us, the way that we mess about. But I think everybody that's into this should really try to find out who their guides are, because you'll just have great fun. They usually give you a guide that's very similar to yourself, so you can relate to them. So they would have your type of personality. So if you're very serious, they'll probably be very serious. If you're joking and like messing about like I do, you would get a guide like that. So I just think a lot of people are missing out if they just don't know who their guides are.
So this podcast will come out after the one I did with June yesterday, which did touch on guides. And that was, I'll link it to you so you can hear it, but it's nothing you don't know. But guides are different to guardian angels, aren't they?
Yes, yeah. You've all born with guides. You may have, most people have got at least a couple. They've got maybe 2, 3. I've got 4. So they work with you with different aspects within your life, depending what you're working on. So Dave is my main guide, but I've also got Aboriginal guide that does my shamanic stuff with me. I have another guide that does work with me in spirit, but I think he's more there for me when I'm passing spirit over, when I'm connecting, like doing the funerals and that time. And then I knew I had a 4th one because mine are all men. But when I started checking up on my 4th one, which I'm going to do a bit more research into in a couple of weeks, because I'm actually going to do a board session and connect with him and see what he does. But as far as I know, he's a doctor. So he's going to be helping me with my healing when I'll be working with June next year. I'm doing the healing stuff, so I've got to go into. But he's been a bit dormant. I haven't really made much connection to him, but I think they wait until the time's right when they come forward. And then you've got your guardian angel, which is with you every lifetime that you have. They come in and they're with you between the life and death moments. If it's not your path, they'll move something out of the way, move you out of the way. And then you've got your Kindle angel, which is your go-to one for like parking or other things that if you call upon them rather than a guide. And then, of course, you've got the bigger angels. Raphael, Michael, and all those what people do use for healing, and you can call them in as well. But the higher level than that, because there's about 7 levels of angels, you wouldn't have any connection to them. You probably just mainly use the archangels in that scenario. So you've got them to call on, and you've got all your ancestors. So if you've got anybody that's passed over, you've got all of them as well that you can connect to. So there is, and go back if you want to. So you've got like an army behind you of people that you can call upon and use. And I think this is when you become more aware of who you can connect to and why you can connect them for different reasons. It's fascinating, really. It's a subject you could just probably go on forever.
Yeah. So do you think the everyday Joe is able to communicate with their guide? Do you think what can they do to start that conversation? What would that look like for them?
But the easiest way to do it is using a pendulum. Is to get find your yes and no answers and your maybe, and then you can do it that way. But when I do my sessions, when I do the angel board, I use that to connect to the guides. So we find out who our guides are, what connection they are to us, if we've had a life with them, how many lifetimes that we've been connected to them, what they look like, what their names are. And some people want to know more about the angel side, so they do that, but that's all that one is for. So we can find out a lot of information by doing that. And then I work with a different type of board, which which most people know as a Ouija board, but I call it spirit board. And I started to work with that for people that had suicides in their family, murders, people that were lost, you know, physically lost, not mentally lost, physically lost. So I was working with that. So we've solved quite a lot of things by using the board. But I mean, you can use a spirit board for both if you want to, which we'll probably do in a couple of weeks because there's stuff that I need to get to the bottom of. But yeah, just using different methods. Yeah, so just using I use the boards to find out a lot of information, but I do understand not a lot of people would do them. But I did show June a few clips of them when I was over there the other week. And it's not actually scary. Again, that's all down to the films and people watching horror movies and stuff like that. It really is not, if you know what you're doing. I've had like mediums come to me before and say, you know, you shouldn't be doing that stuff. But why? If you think that you're a strong medium and you work with spirit all the time, why would you be worried about that? I'm looked after, so why would I worry about it? And even if there is a little incident that may happen that nobody would ever be aware of, it's dealt with. So never had a problem with it. But it took me quite a long time to decide that how I would do it. It wasn't something I took lightly.
Yeah, but you've been doing this for years, so you're well grounded in what you do, and you know you're safe.
Yeah. So it's a good source of information. You can get a lot of stuff come through, especially if you want to speak to like grandparents or even aunts, uncles, whoever, and you want to get some information that nobody knows. That's the best way to do it.
So really, a pendulum is a really easy and accessible and way for people who don't feel that they can intuit a message or hear a message. I mean, I do it all the time, but it's what I think is nice about it, and everything explained about the angels is just knowing that we're not alone.
Yeah, even if you are alone, you never feel alone. No. There's always someone around. And that's a good thing, I think, about connecting to your guides, because once you can sense them, and as you know, I've done development circles and I've run those for many years, probably about 15 years or so. I teach people how to connect with their spirits that are around them. So, you know, say, for instance, like my guide, he will be in my left ear. My nan would be, or females will be in the right. My granddad is behind. I get touched on top of the head if I know that's like one of my nans. So then if it's either side and I know that it's not Dave and it's somebody else, like an uncle or something like that, then I have to tune in a bit more to get who he actually is. But you get a sense of knowing anyway. But you have to sort of tell the spirit what to do. So if you're just going to call them in and they're doing whatever, you're never going to know who you're connecting to. It's easier to get that link straight away. So when I'm doing my readings, I know if I've got a granddad or I've got a dad or I've got a mum or whatever, because I've just told spirit that's how it's to work. And that's where Dave comes in. So Dave is like the buffer between the two of us. So once I don't start a reading until I know Dave's here. And I go, come on, where are you? Oh, okay, let's get going. And then we get going. And I know that he's bringing them in like one at a time, because if they all come in at once, you don't know who you've got. In the end, it's really confusing. And I don't want all that going on when I'm doing any of my readings. I just want to know who I've got and then work with it. So if they can go to like a spiritual group and learn how to do some of the stuff, I mean, a bit difficult at the moment. But that would help them in the connections that they're trying to know who they're connecting to. But otherwise, a pendulum is probably the easiest way of doing it, to learn who you've got or who your guides are. Some people won't want to connect to guides. They might just want to do angels, or they might want to speak to family. Whichever. They'll all come in. They'll all hear you once you open the door. I just say, if you're not used to working spiritually, then you have to remember to do your grounding and your protection every time that you open up. And again, to close down with, especially if you're going to go out or drive a car or anything like that, because you'll just leave yourself open. There's simple methods of closing down, but you need to learn some of those methods as well, I think, once you start getting into the spiritual side of things.
That's a great tip. Tracie, you do so much. I have no doubt that I'm going to podcast with you again and we'll touch on other subjects. But I think for now, that is brilliant. Thank you so much for your words of wisdom. And I look forward to our next chat.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Hera Hotspot podcast. I hope you enjoyed our chat. Until next time, take care.